Linnea is muted.
Linnea, you're muted.
I can't be. I couldn't possibly be muted.
You are. Go ahead. You're good.
What? I
Oh.
wasn't. Okay.
You were.
All right. Yeah, so we are now live. Welcome to the show.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Anyway, today is Communism Day on this show, or Socialist Day, or I guess randomly being muted day, both really. We are going to talk about Trump's visit to Red China, what we expect or hope to come from the meetings there, if anything at all. And we'll discuss the supposedly balanced budget of Red New York City. Is it really balanced? And for how long? And for Unhinged, the questionable economic takes of a certain Red Congresswoman. All of this on episode 536 of the In the Tank podcast. We love the way Trump says China. Welcome to the In the Tank podcast. I am Linnea Lukin, your host. And as always, we also have Jim Lakely, Vice President and Director of Communications at the Heartland Institute, Chris Talgo, Editorial Director and Socialism Research Fellow, and Sam Karnick, Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute. And we also have producer Andy Singer in the background muting me at the start of the show and keeping it moving along otherwise. I did not mute myself. I'm not letting anybody put that on me. All right. Before we get started, if you want to support this show, you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate there. Please also click the thumbs up to like this video. And remember that sharing it helps to break through some of YouTube's suppression. Guys, I see you in the chat right now. Every single person in the chat, especially on YouTube, you have no choice. You are compelled to click the like button. All right, even just helping us out by leaving a comment would be great. And if you're an audio listener, you can help us by leaving a nice review or a mean review, any review really. So I'm going to leave a mean review for StreamYard or for something because I certainly did not mute myself at the start of this video, but apparently I was muted. Yeah, okay. Ian McMillan in our chat says blame it on climate change. I like that idea. That is what I'm going to do. I will not blame Andy. I will blame the climate change. All right. Well, how is everybody doing?
Great.
Well.
Terrible, huh? Well, okay, fine. I'll move us along then. If we're not gonna. All right. So for Unhinged today, we have our absolute favorite Congresswoman, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She went on a podcast called It's Open with Ilana Glazer, which I have never heard of before. But they discuss AOC's views on how billionaires are created, or rather how they cannot be ethically created, or legitimately created. Let us watch the video.
There's a certain level of wealth and accumulation that is unearned, right? You can't earn $1 billion.
That's right.
You just can't earn that.
That's exactly correct.
You can get market power, you can break rules, you can do all sorts of things. You can abuse labor laws.
Yep.
You can pay people less than what they're worth.
Yep.
But you can't earn that, right?
That's right.
And so you have to create a myth that since you didn't earn that, you have to create a myth of earning it.
You sure about that?
That's very enlightening. Thank you, AOC. Jim, what are our feelings about this take? Because clearly what she's suggesting here is that, there's kind of this perception that people who are billionaires have $1 billion in the bank. It couldn't possibly be that someone who's the CEO or the owner of a company like Amazon or something that's valued at $1 billion would count towards their net worth. But I don't know.
Well, I mean, first of all, she's confusing money and wealth. Those are two actually very different things, as you alluded to right there in that setup. Neither Elon Musk nor Jeff Bezos are sitting on a pile of money like Scrooge McDuck, doing laps in their pool full of gold coins. I mean, that's not how this works. And the difference between money and wealth is that money is a physical asset used to exchange, to replace bartering of either time or other goods for what you desire instead. It's just a proxy for that. And wealth is very different. It's not surprising that a socialist, a communist like AOC would not understand the difference between those two things, because they also believe that, if they even can define wealth, they would define it as a single pie that is always one size, and that the only way somebody could get a bigger piece of the wealth pie is to steal what is rightfully the rightful part of that pie that should belong to somebody else. That is a toxic ideology that has been kicking around, well, obviously since Engels and Marx, and it's led to not just economic ruin, but human misery throughout now 150 years. The idea that this woman even gets, and actually the scary thing to me was the host of the podcast, who kept nodding along and probably believes even more radical things than AOC does. But I would ask Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I would ask her this: J.K. Rowling is a billionaire. Who did she exploit to earn her wealth? How did she not earn her wealth and her money from writing the most successful series of fantasy books in the 20th century? All right, maybe outside of Lord of the Rings. There was no exploitation involved in that. She created something out of nothing and became wealthy for it. And she also spread happiness and joy to literally millions of people, maybe more than 1 billion people around the world who enjoy those books and enjoyed the movies. There was no exploitation with that whatsoever. And in a point of fact, Elon Musk is not exploiting anyone. He is creating things out of nothing. He's created a market for luxury electric vehicles that did not exist before he founded Tesla. And he is now reinventing space travel. He has reduced, the private sector did this, not NASA. He has reduced the cost of sending a ton of weight into space by exponential amounts to what it was just 5-10 years ago, and it continues to go down. That is creating value and creating wealth for the United States and other countries. And again, Elon Musk is not sitting on $1 billion. This kind of class envy politics really needs to go, and it needs to go by voting against people who employ it. And then just my last thing is, like, who the hell does she think she is, by the way? It is not your place, especially as an elected representative, to be passing judgments on who has enough money and who doesn't. And so you're going to take from people who actually create wealth and create wonderful things in your redistribution scheme. That is immoral, and it should never happen. And but here we go. The entire Democratic Party, frankly, has moved so far to the left. Everybody running as a Democrat embraces this kind of commie mindset.
Yeah, I guess what my question for AOC would be is, so how, so if you tax this guy based on a $1 billion net worth, where does the cash come from to pay the taxes? Since that money probably doesn't actually exist like in the bank, and I've seen this time and again, every single time this discussion about, how do we squeeze more money out of the top earners in this country, even though they already pay the vast majority of our taxes. So the question becomes, from where? I mean, I guess if you're a communist, you take, state control of Amazon.com and I don't know, then the valuation becomes something that's possessed by government, but you're still not going to be like redistributing the money from Amazon, right?
Let me take this. I don't think they care how you get the money. It's not an issue for them. The expectation, I think, is that you will sell some of your assets if you don't have enough revenue. You'll just sell some of your assets, and you'll sell more of them every year, until somehow you are magically down to the right level. And this is what I would ask the Congresswoman. What is the right amount? What is the amount that you can earn per year? What is that number? My guess is that it would be just a bit higher than what she thinks she might be able to get in a year down the road. It's so silly and stupid. I really don't have much to add to what Jim said, because it's all, rather obvious that this is incredibly foolish talk. There's just nothing to it whatsoever. It's not moral. It's certainly not moral, because what you're saying is we can take this from you. We can command you to hand over whatever amount we say, because we say you didn't earn it. So what they've done is they've redefined wealth. They've redefined the entire economy. And frankly, she's just picking up on what her, boss said more than a dozen years ago, Barack Obama. It's almost 2 decades ago at this point. They were saying you didn't earn that. The government built roads and a post office, and so you shouldn't get to keep the profits from the things that you've given people, the goods and services that you've created by your own ingenuity, hard work, and employment of assets and people. So it's completely insane. It has no connection to reality. And it's obvious that if you operated on this assumption, the definition of what can be earned and what is by definition not earned will keep coming down. It will keep going down and down and down, and it will count for everyone except people in Congress and the people who give money to them. And everything will be taken away from you. So this is obviously insane and won't work, because people will not work and invest if they can't get something back for it. It'll be just like Russia during the Soviet Union times. You won't have anything. If that's what you want, go ahead. But it's not very smart. In fact, it's crazy and stupid.
I just have a couple things to add. So first of all, AOC is, berating billionaires, but I bet you anything she will not do that to Tom Steyer or JB Pritzker, because they are on her political side of the aisle. So I do think this is all about trying to vilify those right-wing billionaires, the guys who are on the other side of the political aisle. I also think that AOC is so undermining America's values of meritocracy, hard work, self-reliance by spinning this myth that if you earned $1 billion by providing goods and services that people voluntarily desired and therefore purchased, that somehow you've done something evil. That is not the case. Whether it's Jeff Bezos, whether it's Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, or any other billionaire for that matter, even Michael Jordan, he's a billionaire. Tiger Woods was a billionaire. You know what they did? They provided goods and services that people wanted to purchase. There was no coercion in that whatsoever. The only coercion going on is that AOC wants to tell you how much you can have. And that's a really, really sad thing, because I think a lot of Americans are buying into that as we are seeing democratic socialists become, legislators across this country. And we're going to talk about what's going on in New York City pretty soon. That's got the same problem here.
Yeah, just one last point here. It's like, do you know who didn't earn its wealth? The federal government. Yet AOC and 434 other members of Congress control more than $1 trillion annually. So per capita, actually, each one of the members of Congress is actually richer, wealthier than Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos with our money. And then, but their redistribution of our wealth, they say it's for the public good, but it is at best very inefficient, full of fraud, and actually makes all the problems that they're spending our money on to solve worse, from healthcare to homelessness, even in the environment.
And it deters long-term growth.
They spend billions of dollars to fake NGOs that enrich themselves and their friends. How the hell do you think somebody can come into Congress with a net worth of about $100,000 and leave it within 10 years being a multimillionaire?
The worst thing, though, is that it deters future economic growth. So if you take an existing pie, like Jim said, because they think that everything's a zero-sum game, that there's a $19 trillion like fund that can just be distributed. The thing is that $19 trillion GDP today is not going to be $24 trillion in a couple of years, because you've taken away all the incentives for new entrepreneurs and new innovations and new inventions to thrive. AOC just does not understand, despite the fact that she has an economics degree, or so I've heard, that if you take away incentives from people, if you take away the free enterprise system, you're going to have the exact opposite of that. And that's going to be misery. That's going to be poverty. And we've already seen that happen in Cuba, Soviet Union, North Korea, and in places in China as we speak. So it's a bad, bad, bad idea.
Yeah, absolutely. It is kind of, I guess the answer to the question of what would make them happy would just be nothing, because communism just consumes and consumes and consumes. It's never satisfied. It is
about power.
Yeah, it
They
is.
want power.
The fire rises, comrades, and it eats everything it can. It's astonishing when you look at history and the idea that, like, well, if we just give the government control of this industry, like farming or manufacturing or whatever, it'll make it equal and even, and everyone will be good, and it'll be fair for everybody. And then what it turns out to do in practice is it creates oligarchs and government billionaires. And the people end up getting blamed when the companies that the government takes over start to fall apart. The government doesn't say, oh, actually, well, maybe our management is bad and maybe we need to, try and find somebody who knows what they're doing to run these companies or whatever, or these factories. What the USSR did is they just started executing middle managers. And I laugh, but it's absolutely appalling what all of this stuff leads to. Were you saying something, Chris? I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that this is predicated on the myth that the economy is a zero-sum game. The economy is not a zero-sum game. The economy is the byproduct of the incentive structure that you put in place. In the Soviet Union, the incentive structure was for corruption and for lack of innovation. In the United States, when you have a free enterprise system and you let the visible hand of the market just do its thing, guess what? It's going to be a billion times better, no pun intended, than any sort of centrally controlled economy can ever be, because there is no one that's ever going to have all the knowledge necessary to say this person needs that person needs this. And you know what? It's unethical, it's immoral, and it retards, there's that word again, human progress and flourishing.
And then it reminds me of of many things that Barack Obama said as president that would trigger me. It came to mind when he says, you didn't build that. This attitude, and AOC's and this whole attitude just wipes away the most important part of wealth creation, and that is risk taking. These people, Elon Musk took a lot of risk to build what he has built in just SpaceX and Tesla. Same thing with Bezos. Same thing with any modern titan of business, there was a risk involved. And here comes AOC. So it's a marathon, right? 26.2 miles. It's a marathon. And then AOC jumps in with about 100 yards to go and says, we're winning together and I'm taking half of your stuff. It's absurd because the risk taking is, there are, if anybody who's trying to run a small business, a pizza shop, an art gallery, a coffee shop, knows that it's a very, very difficult thing to do, that the chances of failure are much, much higher than the chance of success. Yet Americans especially continue to do that because of the reward that is possible if you're smart with your business plan, if you work really hard, you can be a success in this country. The attitude of AOC is that once you become a success, once you are of the 1% that really, really makes it, we are going to demonize you. We're going to make the public resent you. And we're going to confiscate as much of the wealth that you created as possible. People in the comments here have noted, and I've thought of it before, that there's this scheme from Elizabeth Warren and I'm sure AOC to tax unrealized gains. So before you can even, so you take all of this risk, you invest. And again, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are not sitting on a big pile of gold. Most of their wealth is determined by the value of the companies they have founded. And now the government has a scheme, apparently, to actually tax the risk you're taking before you can even realize the benefits of you betting right on risk through investments. It's absolutely toxic.
Just one last thing, Lene, before we move on, there's a virtue element here too, because what she's doing is she's trying to foster class envy. She is basically using humanity's worst impulses of jealousy and envy. And that's something that we need to stop. We need to tell people, you know what, you shouldn't villainize the billionaire. You know what you should do? You should try to be the next billionaire.
I will give her credit for one thing. She's emulating a winner, Barack Obama. She is an entirely untalented person who has no experience doing anything of importance and value, and she wants to be something bigger than the president. I don't know what that is, but
she wants to change the country, just like Barack Obama.
Right. Just as Barack Obama did.
Change it.
And yes, he effected a fundamental transformation. He did effect that. Fortunately, it's been reversed since then.
Some ways.
Why are we talking about AOC? We're talking about her because the Democrat Party has given power over to people like her, Liz Warren, other just completely, frankly, demented individuals who have no connection to reality. They simply don't understand how anything works. They really don't. And so we're talking about AOC because she has become important because the press and the Democrat Party have made her important. They say that they will follow what people like AOC are up to. That is I don't see that as a winning program, and maybe they're fooling around, and we'll find out.
Well, I think we have another clip. Do we want to play that, or do we want to just move along?
Let's play it. I did save it for a reason. I forget what it is. I think it might be something fun to react to, because I think somebody in the chat actually alluded to it.
AOC 2.
The American Revolution was against the billionaires of their time. And we are declaring independence from such an extreme marriage of wealth and power and the state that the voices of everyday people did not exist. Now, of course, in that construction, you had slavery, you had, women who were also not full people in the eyes of the law. But since then, as well, it was the organizing of Black Americans that turned America into a full democracy in the 1960s and well before that, with the Voting Rights Act. And so it's actually the most American thing in the world for us to be fighting for the working class. And it's actually patently un-American to try to aspire to transform our country into a place of kings and landed gentry, which is what we should never aspire to regress to.
All right. I see now why you included that clip.
I thought it might trigger.
That's a little bit painful to watch.
Yeah, I thought it might trigger Sam especially, so I was trying to get his goat there.
I'm convinced that she never was a bartender. I think she was a barmaid, because bartenders are usually a lot smarter than what she shows.
Yeah, it is. We're going to talk about Mamdani later, and it's actually really interesting to watch the contrast between her and the way that he talks about his policies, because he is a lot sharper about it. I think he's a lot more intelligent than AOC is. But basically, what we're trying to get across to our audience here in this segment is that, you know, billionaires do not have swimming pools full of gold and gemstones and cash and stuff that they're diving into like Scrooge McDuck. They don't have tangible assets like that. They have, you know, investments in their companies, but they should have tangible assets, and you should too. And the best place to buy precious metals to fill your swimming pool vault is Advisor Metals, of course, as we know on this show very well. At In the Tank, we trust Advisor Metals over all of those other guys, and that's because of the person who runs the company. He is the best of the best. A great friend of Liberty, Ira Brzezinski owns and is the managing member of Advisor Metals. He has decades of experience in precious metals and is the only person in the physical precious metals industry who has the Commodities Futures Trading Commission federal registration. What does that all mean for you? Well, it means that everything Ira or a member of his team says to you has to be factual. So there's no sketchy sales pitch or bait and switch. Ira is held to the highest ethical standards, and there's full transparency, which is way too lacking in other places nowadays. So if you want to diversify your investment portfolio and your savings, if you want to fill a swimming pool in your mansion full of gold, if you are planning for retirement and are concerned about economic uncertainty, if you want a tangible asset that is easy to buy and sell and stuff inside a mattress, you can secure your assets with a wide range of physical precious metals by getting in touch with our friend Ira at Advisor Metals. He is going to make it very easy for you. Please visit climaterealismshow.com/metals, and you can leave your information for Ira and get started with investing in precious metals and expand your current portfolio. Go to climaterealismshow.com/metals. And when you talk to Ira, make sure you let him know that we are the ones who sent you. That helps us while you're helping your financial future by diversifying with precious metals at Advisor Metals. Thank you very much, Ira. Thank you very much, Advisor Metals, for sponsoring this show. It really does help us out. It means a lot to us. And also thank you to our viewers, some of whom have gone to Advisor Metals and have helped us out that way. So thank you very much. All right, let's move on to topic number 2, which is what would we like to see from Trump's visit to China this week? He is in China right now as we speak. I believe he comes back home tomorrow. The Epoch Times reports Trump arrives in Beijing for high-stakes summit amid Taiwan-Iran tensions. The Chinese Communist regime confirmed on May 10th that Trump will visit China from May 13th through May 15th for a state visit and talks with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. The meeting will mark the first face-to-face summit between the two leaders since October 2025 in South Korea. Hours before confirming Trump's visit, the Chinese Foreign Ministry released a short video on X titled Peaceful Coexistence, calling on China and the United States to engage in sincerity and good faith. The video repeated a phrase long used by Xi and other Chinese officials: the earth is too small for China and the US to turn against and confront each other, and the Pacific Ocean is vast enough for both to prosper in their own ways. Sure. Then why aren't you staying on your side of it, buddies? All right. Anyway, so William Chitung Chung, and I'm sorry if I did not pronounce that correctly, but I'm trying, an associate research fellow at Taiwan's Institute for National Defense and Security Research, told the Epoch Times that Beijing's message reflects a long-standing effort to carve out spheres of influence in the Pacific, with the United States dominant in the Eastern and China asserting primacy in East Asia. He pointed to 2025's U.S. national security strategy, emphasizing the strengthening of the first island chain and countering China's regional expansion. Trump has sought both to block Beijing's influence in the Western Hemisphere and to preserve U.S. dominance in the Indo-Pacific. Chung noted that many Asian countries, particularly Japan, continue to support a strong U.S. presence in the region as a counterweight to China. So obviously that article came out just before the talks actually began. And another article from later into the talks confirmed that Xi Jinping, also known as Pooh Bear, is attempting to take an aggressive stance on Taiwan ahead of it. They're really puffing up their chests about it. Currently, the U.S. supplies Taiwan with defensive arms. I knew Andy would like that, which China does not like very much and demands that we stop doing it. And Trump basically said, up yours, we're doing it. And Trump has apparently gotten China to agree that Iran isn't allowed nukes and the Strait of Hormuz should remain open already. So these talks are obviously being dominated by the Iran discussion and also Taiwan. But we've been in what I'd call an economic Cold War with China for years now. When Trump is in office, we're fighting back. With Biden, he let them gain a bunch of ground in the States and abroad. They work closely with Iran and other enemies of the United States for energy and access to important shipping lanes. And don't forget, we also recently black-bagged Beijing's friend Maduro earlier this year. How could we forget? We will not forget. And we have discussed this before, but China holds a massive monopoly on critical mineral refining and production, which puts our national defense and economy in jeopardy at all times. They also have a dominating presence in green technology, particularly batteries and solar panels. And they actually lobby in the United States and they give money to green groups to promote those resources. And many countries fall for it. And they are also dragnetting the Pacific. And they frequently steal fish from the territorial waters of South and Central American countries. So they are not our friends, and they have no intention of being our friends. They would like it if we did not fight them while they, took control over the entire planet. But in the meantime, Trump is not going to he's not going to stop fighting China. So I'm going to go around the panel here and see what we'd like to most see get brought up or come out of these talks. And this is any topic, you guys. Iran, fentanyl, minerals, green tech, spying in our universities, overfishing. Aren't they? Yeah, China is just our buddy, aren't they? I made this list of things that they do. So anything, I'd like to see what our audience thinks as well. Is anybody super anxious to go first here?
Well, so Donald Trump brought a bunch of CEOs from America with him, including the CEO of NVIDIA, of Apple, Tim Cook, and a bunch of others. And apparently what he's going to try to do is try to foster a better relationship among American businesses in China. I just don't know if that's actually going to happen because China's got a really bad history of stealing our intellectual property and coming up with really bad deals for those companies. That the Communist Party gets a 51% ownership stake if they open up a Chinese branch. So there's that. But then again, China does need us more than we need them because they rely on the American economy to buy up all the things that they produce. And when we aren't buying the things that they're producing, that puts them in a really big hole. There's still a lot of problems to China. They've got a really big housing crisis. Their communist government is saying that they're growing at 5%, but they were saying they're growing at 9% a couple of years ago. So take all those with a giant chunk of salt because I don't believe them. So I think what you have happening here is that China is realizing that we need America. We especially need American businesses because before, Nixon went to China and opened it up, China was so backwards. It's not even funny. The average person in China lived on less than $8 a day. Okay. So they were in like utter extreme, backwards poverty. Yes, there are people in the United States that want to decouple. I don't think that that is possible. I think that our economies are so enmeshed together right now, and they're the number one and number two in terms of size on the planet Earth. So I'm not saying that we need to be friends with them. I'm not saying that we need to become allies with them. However, I do think that there is a strategic economic relationship between these two nations, and I would like to see that prosper. Some of the other things you mentioned, the China-Taiwan situation, yeah, they are playing hardball with that. And Trump did say that he sent. Well, he said that Taiwan is buying $14 billion worth of defense goods from the United States. However, that has not been finalized yet. So Xi Jinping is obviously trying to throw a wrench into that. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. And then lastly, what you said about the rare earth metals, yes, China obviously does dominate that. They monopolize that. Thankfully, Donald Trump or President Trump is doing things to open up some strip mining for those kinds of things here in the United States, also Australia, even in places in the Middle East. So it looks like he has a long-term plan to address some of these things that China is trying to box us in on, while at the meantime still having that big carrot out there for them, because their economy depends on our economy and vice versa. So I think a automatic and swift decoupling would be pretty disastrous. So I overall like the posture that President Trump is taking on this trip so far.
Yep, absolutely. Sam?
President Trump seems to have already accomplished all the things that he has gone to Beijing to do. The thing is that he accomplished them in Venezuela and Iran, not in Beijing. You don't go to a place to negotiate and say, okay, here's what I would like. No, what you do is you go to a place to negotiate and say, here's what I'm going to let you have. And Americans, the press and the sort of mainstream think tank people in the foreign policy think tanks and so forth all seem to think that, well, Trump's not really going to get anything from China and so on and so forth. That's wrong in a couple of ways. One is that we don't need anything from China. They are so weak that it is really almost disturbing that people are so worried about China. China's economy is in very, very, very bad shape. Their debt increased by six times as much as the U.S. debt since 2020. Their debt is much greater, much greater than the U.S. federal debt. Overall debt in China, including the people, is not quite as bad because the Chinese people save a lot. The reason they save a lot, and you have economists such as the Wall Street Journal deploys, saying that China is struggling because the people just won't spend enough. They won't consume. And consumption, according to the Wall Street Journal, is what drives an economy. That's absurd. What drives an economy is production. You can't consume without people producing things. So the reason that they are not consuming in China is that the government runs the economy. They are communists over there, and they incorporate certain elements of what appear to be choice, but they aren't. They tell the businesses what they're supposed to do, how much output they're supposed to make, and then have them sell it to the United States in particular, as Chris noted. And they sell that stuff to other countries, not to their own selves. And in order for that to happen, the government has to prop up those industries. Well, where do they get that money? They've been borrowing it. So China is not a growing concern. It is not a good economy. They have very little power in military terms. I mean, yes, maybe more than Taiwan. There's certainly more than Taiwan and probably Korea and Japan and so forth. But they're a weak country in so many ways. And for us to be so worried about what does China think? What does China want? You know what China wants? China wants us to stay in our lane. Okay. They want to say now, oh, you just take the Western Hemisphere and we'll take the Eastern Hemisphere. Well, you know what? We took the Western Hemisphere on our own under President Trump. we had given it to China for decades. Now, Trump came in, and in less than a year, he has basically taken the Western Hemisphere and said, this is our realm, and that includes Greenland and the Arctic and so forth. And if you don't like it, you know what? Let's see what you have. You do something about it. Because what Trump clearly understands is that China is a weak country compared to us. And China wants to tell us, look, we'll give you the Western Hemisphere if you give us the Eastern Hemisphere, and don't arm Taiwan and tell Japan and South Korea to back off and so forth. What Trump's response to that is, you're not giving us anything. We took the Western Hemisphere from you, and you couldn't do a darn thing about it. And if we want to be in the eastern side of the Pacific, we're going to be there. And you know why? Because our allies are over there, and they're saying to us they want us involved. So Trump has pivoted away from Europe, which is a wise move because that's a collapsing civilization, and it's done for. And Europe is in even worse condition than China by a good measure. So what he's done is he's pivoted to the Western Hemisphere, solidify that, and then do things like making sure that the Straits of Hormuz are under our control. We are controlling that. And we don't get our oil from the Straits of Hormuz. Only 20% of the oil that we use in the United States goes through the Straits of Hormuz, and we really don't need any of it. So what Trump has been doing is all intended to strengthen the position of the United States against these weak players whom we have empowered ourselves, it almost seems deliberately. It is possible, though, and in fact, it's probable that it was just massive stupidity on the part of our elites and our government that caused this illusion in the first place. But China is a weak place. We decide what our relationship with China is. They don't decide it. And we decide what China's place in the world is. They don't decide it. That's really where things are right now.
In the late 1990s, a lot of U.S. corporations bought into this globalism, phenomena that said, if you go and build a plant there, not only are you going to bring democracy there, but you're going to be more prosperous. And you know what? That didn't exactly work out that way. And let's also keep in mind that China is not a self-sufficient country in terms of energy or in terms of food. They buy hundreds of millions of tons of soybeans from us. And if you believe the talks that were held last night before the banquet, Trump came out and said that Xi Jinping had agreed to become a buyer of U.S. energy, particularly LNG, liquefied natural gas, and coal and oil. So that would be a huge boon to the United States if that were to happen. But let's remember that it was the late 1990s letting China into the World Trade Organization and giving them most favored nation status and allowing them to get away with all these intellectual thefts and all these, bad things that they were doing under the auspice that, well, it will bring freedom to them. Guess what? It hasn't. The Communist Party has actually used those tea leaves from America and such, and taken it to their advantage. And we need to make sure that it stops.
Yeah,
It is. It does come across as a little bit petulant when you look at the stuff that they do, on our shores in terms of the espionage and,
Fentanyl.
and the fentanyl stuff or the fentanyl precursors and the kind of underhanded, sneaky spying in our universities, and also
there was a mayor in California who was just arrested because she's a communist spy. Last time I checked, Eric Swalwell had a communist spy, Fang Fang, and Dianne Feinstein had a communist driver. So it's like the fact they are trying to infiltrate the United States and cause havoc. We all know that. We just need to, have our defenses up. And I think that President Trump, unlike any other president, went in there and said, you guys are not playing fair. This trade deficit's insane. We're going to make you actually compete on an even playing field, and that's great because that's what this should be. China, if they can compete on an even playing field, good for them. But if they're going to subsidize and dump product in the United States, like Sam said, they're not operating on an even playing field. And you know what? That's unfair to American manufacturing, and that's why I'm so glad that President Trump has said, we're going to bring those manufacturing facilities back to the United States. We're going to get rid of these stupid climate and environmental regulations, and we're just going to make it better for American businesses. That, I think, is the key to overcoming the dependence upon China for especially things like medications and other things. We need to have that stuff built here at home in America.
Absolutely right. China does these petty little things in America because they're weak, not because they're strong. The fact that they send us fentanyl makes them as strong as Mexico. Big deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing that we can, I think, all agree on is that you cannot trust the legacy media and anything they say about Trump's foreign policy, let alone this trip. They've been wrong about all of his foreign policy goals and achievements since the first term. And this, one of the criticisms of Donald Trump, especially with his lower approval ratings, is that in his second term, he has spent a lot of time on foreign policy and not enough time on domestic policy. And that's a fair enough criticism. But his success, this is Donald Trump at his best in his element, making deals. He wrote The Art of the Deal, 35 years ago? And he continues to employ these tactics and get a good deal for America every time he goes abroad. And that is because he is always negotiating from a position of strength. You might note that he did not bring Don Jr. along to set up deals with the Chinese to make the Trump family richer, like previous president had done. And our previous president, frankly, seemed to always be negotiating with the Chinese from a position of weakness. There's a reason why Donald Trump got off the plane with the 30 biggest CEOs in America right behind him off of the plane, and that is because that is a old-fashioned, machismo position visual for him. It was to show how strong America is and how strong. So it was Elon Musk, Tim Cook, even Larry Fink of BlackRock was with him. Mm-hmm. And that's to show how strong America and our negotiating position is with China. Look, is it better for us in the world if China and the U.S. have more of a partnership of a relationship, or one as a relationship as adversaries? Obviously, partnership, for better or worse, would be better than always being adversarial, to almost, because that can escalate quickly. And Trump, again, is a big believer in economic diplomacy. I mean, he's done that in the Middle East. He's talked about this publicly. He said to the sultans, help me make peace, and then we'll all get rich. And that's the good thing. And that was a pretty good incentive to, normalize relations with Israel, for instance. But he's cut off the oil to China from Venezuela and Iran. So he's in a position of strength there. And as Chris, I believe, mentioned, they want to buy our LNG gas, or LNG. Again, that's a position of strength. And this is also important, Sam, and I'm glad you brought it up, that China they're going to have a really big demographic problem. They're already experiencing it now because of their long-standing one-child policy. That's going to hurt their economy. It's already hurting their economy. And it's an unfixable demographic problem that they still don't know how to grapple with, because I very much doubt that the Communist Chinese Party is going to be wanting to import a bunch of labor into their country in order to keep economic growth going. So they're in big trouble on that. And then just one last thing, on the rare earth minerals front, remember, I always wanted a weekly, is Greenland a state yet update, and how everybody lost their minds about what Donald Trump said about Greenland. Well, we've actually been negotiating with Denmark behind the scenes about Greenland, and we are apparently very close to establishing some very large new bases in the Arctic on the north of Greenland that will, if we get our way fully, I've read, is going to be sovereign U.S. territory. And so that is also mineral-rich sovereign territory. Yeah. So, when he says, I want Greenland, he didn't really mean all of Greenland. He meant just the parts that America needs to secure our national, for national security reasons, to have a much larger presence in the Arctic. And then also there's mineral rights up there with it as well. Again, that's why you cannot listen to anything the legacy media says about this trip or almost any foreign policy negotiations or trip that Donald Trump takes, because they don't understand what he is doing. He's laid it all out in The Art of the Deal. He loves this stuff, and he's also very good at it. We're going to have a better and stronger, do I trust, obviously, I've said it, I trust Donald Trump to come back from China with a better deal than Biden had ever negotiated, and something that's going to be good for our national security, for our economy. Guarantee it.
President Biden never even went to China during his term. He never made a foreign trip to China. And I think that's very telling. I think he was scared to go there and face Xi one-on-one. And when Biden did go to the Middle East and he faced some of those leaders, he made a fool out of himself. So it's much better having a strong, powerful, sane president going to China and representing the United States as opposed to what we had before, which was not.
Yeah, and the Department of the Interior just issued a rule to rescind the Conservation and Landscape Health Rule, which opens up a whole lot of federal land for mineral exploration as well. So we might not even need Greenland necessarily. But also, I wanted to point out too that, since Sam was kind of constructing the I guess the paper tiger vision of China, which I agree with. I do think it's still dangerous, and we still shouldn't be pretending like they're our friend, because they're really not. You can do economic business with someone and not be their friend and not pretend like you are. And it is something that drives people a little bit nuts with Trump, but I understand it's part of the art of the deal when he goes in there and he's, kind of like slapping backs and stuff, acting like they're buddies. He used to do that with North Korea, and it made people lose their minds because he was so nice. And then he would go and call him short. So there was a little bit of interplay there, and I think he was just having a whole lot of fun with that. But I did want to point out that that Chinese kind of investment into Africa and parts of Eurasia, the Belt and Road, right? Belt and Road Initiative supposedly is starting to kind of fall apart. And in Africa, it's starting to fall apart, which surprised me initially, because I thought that's an easy deal, right? China comes in and says, we're going to do all this investment into railroads and energy production and all sorts of stuff in Africa. And we get to, have it the benefits of getting these resources, and the people get jobs, and it's a win-win. However, it turns out that China has been hemorrhaging money on these projects, actually, because they have been running into a lot of corruption dealing with African governments, which I just thought was really funny, to have the Chinese Communist Party, a corrupt government itself, have its plans thwarted by dealing with other corrupt governments is quite a funny situation.
Well, the real reason that China is taking a loss on all these things is because the decisions are all made by the government. And governments cannot process all the information that's needed to understand what is the best place to put any particular resource, to invest, to put in any particular amount of money. So what they did was they decided, Belt and Road, Silk Road, we're going to become great through this process. And so once you decide that, then you say, okay, well, in order to do that, we have to do this, this, and this. And that means we have to invest this, this, and this money, and so on and so forth. But did anyone actually who is not in a government say, let's go to Africa and really build big there and put in a lot of infrastructure for who knows what purpose? So that's the problem. The problem is that it's government doing it. And isn't it interesting that when Donald Trump goes to China in his first visit in this term, he brings a bunch of private sector executives with him. He gets it. He gets it. I guess he hasn't read Friedrich Hayek and von Mises, but somebody's given him those principles. He understands that government can't do these things. Well, I guess he learned that in New York City. because boy, it couldn't be more obvious than that place. That's almost a transition. I'll leave that one
Yeah,
for you,
very good.
Linnea.
Thank
However,
you so much.
however, it is a fact. That's the real problem with China's investments in Africa and across the Middle East, and also don't forget that Trump literally blocked him physically in Azerbaijan. Literally put a new ally in place so that China cannot get to Georgia. So this is brilliant. This is fascinating. But what it all amounts to is that because they are government and because they rely on government to make these choices, to make these decisions, they're never going to work, and you're always going to end up running out of money. That's one of the reasons they're borrowing so much, but also the fact that they have to borrow to do anything, to just to run their own businesses, is crippling their economy.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you very much for that good transition. Speaking of New York City, and speaking of my dog barking, Mamdani claims to have balanced New York City's budget. Wow, $12 billion or something. So Hot Air's John Sexton reports on how socialist New York Mayor Mamdani has apparently balanced the city budget, except not really. So at first glance, this is somewhat impressive, he writes, given that recently, as a few months ago, the expected shortfall was more than $12 billion. However, as with everything Mamdani puts out, it's less impressive when you look at the details. Here's his new video in which, he posted a video in which Mamdani is shouting the good news from the rooftops. I don't know if we can play that. Sorry, I know you weren't anticipating a video there, Andy. We don't have to play it. All right. So, but how did Mamdani achieve this apparent miracle? Well, he asked mom for money, Sexton writes. A lot of this is coming from Governor Hochul. State taxpayers will now be giving billions more to New York City. Prior to the budget release, Governor Kathy Hochul and Mayor Mamdani announced new state support and actions to help New York City close its deficit. Governor Hochul, in partnership with the state legislature, secured an additional $4 billion in gap closing support. Mamdani put off a plan to shrink class sizes by hiring more teachers for a school system that really needs to be closing schools. And New York City is now spending $44,000 per student, one of the highest amounts of any big city, with mixed results. So the decision not to hire more teachers now is a good one, but Mamdani hasn't actually solved the problem at this point. He just kicked the can down the road. Another pot of money comes from cutting funds to the pension plan, which I'm sure everybody is just thrilled by. Hochul is set to provide a state approval allowing Mamdani to extend the period over which public pension contributions are made, a change expected to save the money $1.6 billion for the upcoming fiscal year. And Andrew Rain, president of the fiscally hawkish Citizens Budget Commission, pans the pension contribution delay, arguing that it saddles future generations with an unfair burden. He said, we have to solve this budget gap today. And basically, by stretching out pension payments, we're asking people in the mid-2030s to solve the 2027 budget gap. And that's simply not fair. We're going to now ask people who don't even live here yet to help us balance the budget now. Mamdani is also counting on $500 million from his pied-à-terre tax, which has not been approved yet. And he's promising another $850 million in savings by better controlling overtime and improved efficiency, so they say. So, Sam, I know you want to talk about this one, so I will let you go first here. What's the problem? He's balanced the budget. Everything is fine now. They fixed it.
Right. He's balanced the budget exactly the way places like Chicago and Seattle and Portland and San Francisco and Los Angeles have balanced the budget. In particular, Illinois has been fantastic about this in delaying payments into the pension funds. You have to pay out the pensions at some point, but in the meantime, you have to put the money in so that it can be invested, so that it can reach the size that you need in order to be able to pay it out down the road. So what they're doing is they're borrowing from future taxpayers by doing that. And that is going to create a real crisis for somebody down the road. Apparently, Mamdani does not expect to be mayor for more than about, 3 more years, because those chickens are going to come home to roost. You're going to have to pay that money in. And it's just like with the mayor of Seattle saying, come back, rich people. Or actually, it was Mamdani who said, come back, rich people, and
Kathy
Kathy
Hochul.
Hochul in particular as well. But the mayor of Seattle basically said, go, I don't care. She's going to find out how this works. And Mamdani is he's lucky really that they haven't all left yet. The pied-à-terre tax is going to be quite an incentive to move out. So you get into a real doom spiral, and that's why I mentioned those other cities. They're in it. New York has done fairly well at not falling into a collapse, but it's been driving on fumes, really. They had Republican mayors for quite some time, and they were given over to the business world and were very solicitous of their tax money that they could get through those businesses being there. Since then, de Blasio was a disaster in terms of attracting business, but there was still a lot of fumes there. Adams was actually, I think, somewhat neutral in that regard. He wasn't openly attacking them. And Mamdani is just, he's the next level, and he is, Karen Bass level madness. He's just absolutely awful. And so what's going to happen there is you're going to drive out the employers, so that reduces your sales taxes. It reduces your income tax from workers, and then of course it reduces your taxes that you got from those employers themselves. So you're just shrinking your tax base, and what that does is ensure that even if you want to stop crime, even if you want to do the right thing in terms of rebuilding infrastructure and so forth, you can't. Now, this is a city that spends $44,000 per student in the government-run schools. $44,000 per student. That is, funny thing is, it's only among the highest in the country. It's not actually the highest, that's mind-blowing. And it's just, I'm shocked. I was shocked to see that. However, when you're spending that kind of money, and it's obviously not for education, it's a patronage network. And the interesting thing is the city of Chicago used to run a patronage network that was really, really successful, because what they would do is give you a job as a garbage collector or some other person actually doing civil services, and you would vote and get your friends and family to vote for the Democrats because you have that incentive that your job depends on Democrats being in office. But when it's education, so when it's garbage, if it doesn't happen, people get really ticked off. They notice. Or when it's the roads and you're not maintaining the roads, people notice and they get very upset. But when it's education, they don't know what's going on there. And it's only been since the pandemic, when parents were home with their children and seeing what they were not studying, and that the schools were just a complete laughable institution, they got upset. But with New York City, obviously that's not as big a concern as it would be for, say, a suburb of Chicago or of Cleveland or someplace like that, where the people really still care a bit about traditional values and real education, real learning. So in Manhattan, there's more of a freewheeling kind of an attitude towards those things, and not a lot of children there. Compared to other places, there aren't that many children. So what you had there is that they built a patronage network of sort of upper middle class to upper middle class people, white collar people. And that is and they were able to hide the effects of that for quite some time. But that is becoming very obvious now that that the system doesn't work, and that it is entirely corrupt, and that it is a machine. And so you end up with businesses, to bring it back, you end up with businesses leaving because there's no profit in it, and what little profit you could hope to make will immediately be stripped from you by people who think like AOC, that you don't deserve that money. And so you lose your tax base year after year. The amount of money that the government takes in decreases. And as that happens, you lose the ability to attract new business.
Sam, let me chime in here. It's not a revenue problem because New York City has more than enough revenue. I want to just get off some statistics here. In June 2025, New York City adopted a budget of over $115 billion, larger than the budgets of nearly every U.S. state, according to the New York City Budget Office. Let's see. In Florida, the entire state budget in 2025 was $115.6 billion. Wow. Florida has 24 million people in terms of population. New York City has 8.5 million people. Wow, that's pretty crazy. Let's go into fiscal year 2026. Fiscal year 2026, New York City is facing a deficit of 2.2 billion. Fiscal year 27, 10.4 billion. This year, for fiscal year 2027 preliminary budget, Mamdani wants $14 billion in new spending, including $43 million to, quote, advance affordability efforts. He wants to spend $662 million to modernize and preserve more than 3,200 affordable housing. He wants to spend $3.27 billion making schools, quote unquote, green. And he's already greenlit a $30 million price tag for one grocery store that will be run by the New York City government. Wow.
And it'll be open in 3 years.
And it'll be open in 3 years, everybody. Maybe. Okay, now, in February 2026, so this is only a couple months ago, the New York State Comptroller warned that the quote-unquote trajectory of projected state spending is estimated to increase at a rate faster than expected revenues, creating cumulative out-year budget gaps estimated by the division to total $27.5 billion in 2030. New York State might be able to give them a $4 billion bailout this year, but guess what? In 2028, 2029, and 2030, that is not happening. So basically what needs to happen is New York City needs to rein in the spending. It's all that needs to happen. They do not need more revenue. All he talks about is more revenue, get more revenue from the billionaires, get more revenue from people who have, condos here who don't live here full time. That is not going to work. You have to cut the spending. It is just as simple as that. This is an acute spending problem. This has nothing to do with revenue. Stop spending so much money.
I quite agree. And the problem that you have, though, is if you are imagining that you're going to get the revenue, you're not. And you're going to squeeze yourself worse and worse and worse. But you're absolutely right. It is.
They're in the doom loop. They're in the late stages of the doom loop.
I'm going to just pitch in right before I give it to Jim, though. I will point out a little bit of an I told you so, because I said when Mamdani got elected that that the state was not going to allow New York City to fail under his leadership, that the state and maybe even the feds were going to bail out New York City and give them billions of dollars to maintain their insanity.
No
way. They are trying.
Gerald Ford was right. Drop dead, New York City.
Yeah. All right, Jim, what have we got?
Yeah, Chris is taking every single one of my points, even though I was just going to mention the Ford to City drop dead. He took that from me as well.
Sorry.
That's all right. Look, I was
great minds think alike, Jim. I'm sorry.
You shouldn't have let Chris install MindLink in your brain, Jim.
Yeah, for sure. No, look, I was born in New York City. I moved out when I was 8, but I kept my eye on it. My family kept their eye on New York City, and we lived how bad it was before Rudy Giuliani was elected mayor, and he turned it completely around. And it was considered a miracle, a modern miracle. And it certainly was at the very least, a political miracle of what Rudy Giuliani did to turn New York City around. And it was to institute, at the time, basically conservative Republican principles, the broken windows theory, fiscal restraint, not being afraid to tackle head on basically the social taboos of the time. He wasn't going to put up with any garbage from Reverend Al Sharpton and other race hustlers in New York City. He was going to reduce the crime, improve the quality of life, and it became the safest, most prosperous large city in the world. And he did that in just 2 terms as mayor. Now, he left his last days as mayor of New York City were just after 9/11. He was done in December of 2021. The budget in the year 2000 for the city of New York City was about $37 million. That comes out to about $4,000, $4,500 per capita of people who live in New York City. Today's budget, 2026 for New York City, as Chris pointed out, 115, and a little change, $115 billion. That is per capita, $13,500 per person in New York City. And the quality of life in New York City is much lower today than it was in the year 2000, before the attacks on 9/11. And there's a reason for that. Leftists and Democrats, when they are running our big cities, and they run every large city in the United States, they do nothing but add new programs on top of old ones, which is why they can never balance the budgets without using accounting tricks or just taking more of our money, which is exactly what Mamdani did. It's a fake balanced budget. And it's also important to point out that the budgets in big cities run by Democrats, they're not actually intended to benefit the people who live there. The main purpose of a big city budget run by Democrats is to enrich their voters and their community organizers at the expense of the people. They don't need more money to fix New York. Obviously, like the per capita spending is more than 3 times what it was 26 years ago. What you need is honest governance, and you need at least as honest as you can get in modern politics and in cities these days, and a budget actually that is actually half at least of what it is in New York City right now. If the budget was cut in half, if any competent manager or mayor was told, you only have $50 billion to spend, find your priorities, and that should be actually things that serve the public good, as Sam alluded to. Like, how about filling those potholes? How about making sure the infrastructure is clean, repaired, and solid? How about clearing out the parks of vagrants and drug users and all the stuff that Rudy Giuliani did? New York City was a dream city to live in. It was the best. If you were into urban living, New York City in the 1990s through the 9/11 attacks was the best place to live if you want to live in a city. It is now one of the worst places to live if you like to live in a city. The New York City, frankly, right now, there will never be. I live in the Chicago area now. I remember when Rahm Emanuel ran for mayor, and he did win. And I thought Rahm Emanuel is actually a no bullshit kind of guy. He actually has a lot of Rudy Giuliani in him. If there's anybody who could fix Chicago, it would be a guy like Rahm Emanuel, who just doesn't put up with garbage from people, and he's very strong-willed. It took him about 6 months, and he folded to the teachers' unions in Chicago, and any chance to clean up Chicago was gone. And so if it couldn't happen here, I frankly just can't imagine. Nobody would have imagined Rudy Giuliani would have done what he did for New York City now more than 30 years ago. I have very little faith at all that anybody will ever emerge to fix New York City or any of our big cities, because the corruption and the grift and the graft and the misery just runs too deep.
One other thing that is, I think, important to bring up is that New York City's budget is becoming dominated by debt service payments. And just like the national debt, once those debt service payments start becoming a larger line item than certain programs, then you're really in the doom loop. And New York City is actually like right on the precipice of that. So they need to get the funding they need to get the funding under control. They need to get the debt to GDP ratio, back under control. And they also just need to cut a lot of spending programs.
What Mamdani illustrates is the fact that politics today, especially on the left, has become very much performative and not actually about governing. So instead of fixing the streets and making sure that there are street lights and police and that the transit is clean and so forth, instead of doing those things, they attack the people who make the jobs there and the people who pay the taxes. And that can work for a while because it energizes people who are given to believe that, like Chris said earlier, the whole zero sum idea, that if you have something, it's because you took it from someone else, not because someone voluntarily gave it to you because you gave them something. No, it's you're a thief. And so that can work for a while. But what happens is if you look at places like Seattle and Portland and San Francisco, which is actually getting better now. San Francisco is getting better. Los Angeles, what they all have in common is that the politicians just rile up groups against one another and then claim that they will protect the people from that group. And so it's all about performing. It's all about, frankly, it's demagoguery or demagoguery, I guess is the correct pronunciation. But anyway, it's all about performing. It's all about getting people to hate one another and to vote for you because they're afraid of the people you claim to oppose. But what happens then is that these places are becoming cesspools. What's going on in Los Angeles? Chris Bray, who is a former Substacker, or is still a Substacker, but is now at the Federalist, writes regularly on how awful things are in Los Angeles, and he does what a reporter does. He actually goes out there and looks at what's going on around in and around Griffith Park, for example, and takes pictures of it. This is a city that is absolutely crumbling. Seattle, Portland, same things going on there. New York City, Chicago, places like that, Baltimore, the same things are going on there. They're not as far along in the process, but they'll get there.
You know, Sam, you pondered why Mamdani is not spending money to fix the streets and do all that kind of stuff. I would argue because he doesn't care about that. I would argue that his number one goal in office is to buy as many voters and keep them in his possession as possible.
Yes.
And what that means, more free stuff. That means more class envy, more. The reason you're not well off is because of those people. And that's what New York City has succumbed to. And it's really sad because New York City is historically been the financial, hub of the world, and it's supposed to be this bastion of innovation and entrepreneurship and quote billionaires going there and making it rich in New York City. Now it's becoming a socialist cesspool, and it's. I mean, I haven't been there in a long time. My brother actually went to school in New York City, so I used to visit him, years and years ago, and. Yeah, I would not want to go to New York City. You could not get me there. And if I, lived there, I think I would have fled a very long time ago.
Yeah, we have a video. Let's let Mamdani, pitch his savings, his supposed savings himself here. I just want to show this video clip real quick. Only a couple of seconds of it.
It's executive budget season. I'm proud to announce that our city's budget is fully balanced. This budget isn't just about numbers on a page. It determines if our libraries get funded, if a street is safe to cross, if snow is actually shoveled after a storm. And you deserve to know exactly how we got here. We inherited a $12 billion budget deficit.
We are speaking about a fiscal crisis at the scale greater than the Great Recession.
Was the Great Recession? Great Recession. Many said the only way out of this was slashing services and passing an austerity budget. We rejected that. After months of painstaking work, that deficit is now zero. Our city is now on firm financial ground. We achieved this in two major ways: increasing revenue and support from Albany and cutting waste and finding savings here in New York City. Thanks to Governor Hochul, State Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins, Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie, and months of organizing from New Yorkers, we taxed the rich. That tax alone will raise $500 million per year. And that's not all. Thanks to Governor Hochul and our partners in Albany, we finally got a better deal for New York City. We're getting billions more from the state to help tackle the gap. At the same time, we've been poring over the city budget to identify savings. We reduced unnecessary overtime and found smarter ways for government to deliver services. This all added up to $1.77 billion in total savings. Our budget isn't just about closing deficits. It's about building a city.
But it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
Partnership with Governor Hochul.
That's pretty much exactly what you were talking about with, refusing to reduce spending, absolutely refusing to reduce spending. But I do want to say it is too bad, actually, that he is a communist, because he's actually a very good salesperson. And he'd be great working for Cutco or something. I don't know. But yeah, it's pretty amazing to watch a person who is communist, if not just communist sympathetic, but I think he has actually called himself a democratic socialist. But he's for one, the snow shoveling reference is wildly offensive to everybody who was living in New York this past winter and no snow was getting shoveled; it was just getting pushed around. And the second, the speed at which they passed over the part where they mentioned that they're taxing the rich, and then they just moved on really fast. And they I don't know if I forget if we on this show showed the video of him introducing his pied-à-terre tax, where he stood outside of someone's home and talked about how they were going to tax them for owning it, which was like creepy and threatening. I think. And I believe that the communist means for something like that to be threatening.
Keep in mind, though, that he's not a dictator. He cannot just raise taxes on his own. He has to have the city council to go along with that. And for the past couple of months, the city council has not been in line with his crazy tax increases, because I think the city council understands the gravity of the budget situation. And to be honest with you, I think that Mayor Mamdani just views his mayorship as just another step in his career. I don't think he's really in this to solve New York City's affordability crisis. I don't think he cares about that. I think that he was using this as a stepping stone. And really, I think that Mamdani sees himself in the White House, and that would be the scariest thought of all.
Yeah, we have the clip where he's introducing the tax that he's trying to get passed. I actually don't think it has been passed, but
it hasn't.
Said I was going to tax the rich. Well, today we're taxing the rich. I'm thrilled to announce we've secured a pied-à-terre tax, the first in New York's history. This is an annual fee on luxury properties worth more than $5 million, whose owners do not live full-time in the city. Like for this penthouse, which hedge fund CEO Ken Griffin bought for $238 million. This pied-à-terre tax is specifically designed for the richest of the rich, those who store their wealth in New York City real estate, but who don't actually live here. But even so, they're able to reap the huge financial rewards of owning property in, dare I say, the greatest city in the world. And most of the time, these units are sitting empty, since again, they don't actually live here. This is a fundamentally unfair system that hurts working New Yorkers. Now, it's coming to an end. This tax will raise at least $500 million directly for the city. It'll help fund things like free childcare, cleaner streets, and safer neighborhoods. As mayor, I believe everyone has a role to play in contributing to our city, and some a little bit more than others. Happy Tax Day, New York.
Hey, if somebody owns a piece of property in New York City and doesn't live there full time, that's none of your damn business, but out of somebody's life. That does not mean you get to confiscate their wealth. He is a full-blown, this triggers me, man. He's just a full-blown commie. He wants to actually seize that property and maybe put some homeless people in it. He would be actually, if he could do it, he would. And that's the thing that's so dangerous about communists. They what they would like to do if they thought they could get away with it is very scary and dystopian. And don't think that they don't that they don't think those things, because they say them all the time. Before, with the other clip, talking about his his reducing the budget deficit to zero. That's fake. That is such a lie. It is such BS, and everybody knows it. But I was thinking, watching that, and even that video, which triggers me. God, please save us from the theater kids who become politicians. I just can't take it anymore. I can't take these people with their performative BS, with their quick swipe videos and all this stuff with the sound effects. It's like, man, if you're a theater kid, go into theater and leave me alone. You do not have the temperament, the human temperament, to be lording over us as rulers, and that is what Mamdani thinks he is. Everything in New York City is up for the taking in court, in his eyes. Everything's up for grabs, and his hands are out there everywhere.
Yeah, I have to say, Jim, I have to disagree with you. I strongly disagree with the idea that Mamdani is just like a goofy theater kid type of person trying to get into politics. That's closer to what AOC is. But this guy is serious. He's a real threat. And the stuff that he's doing is not theater kid stuff. The stuff that he's doing is actually like good sales tactics for people of my generation and younger. It actually does work. People like this stuff. People like his, editing and everything, and it gets views and it goes far. You can see it actually. What annoyed me the most about this video is not so much what he was saying, other than the fact that it's commie gobbledygook, but some of the top comments on that Instagram post are from people not in this country saying what a great job he's doing. People saying like, "You're the best mayor ever. I'm from Sao Paulo." Like, that's not that's not a good sign either, right?
Well, he was elected primarily by people who were not born in New York City. That was the vast majority of his electorate. That he was getting smoked by people who were born and lived their lives in New York City. So, take that for what you will, but that New York City is changing, and frankly, not enough people that were born in New York City and understand the history of New York City, and what is possible if you don't elect a commie voted, and so they're getting what they voted for or didn't vote for.
Well, yeah. So we're scrolling through the YouTube comments here, but yeah, it's the point with the pied-à-terre tax here that I have seen made, including in these comments here, is that, well, they can't leave because they already don't live here, because these houses or these apartments they're like second homes or something. That doesn't mean that you're going to get the tax from it, right? I mean, they can just sell the property and then you wouldn't get the tax from it. And then who's going to buy the property? Another millionaire, right? Because these are very expensive apartments. They're not going to be putting, poor people into these apartments. I'm sure they'd like to, but they're not going to, because the valuation of those apartments actually matters for city revenue. So it's a bunch of virtue signaling from this guy, but it's virtue signaling that works to increase his support among the people that voted him in.
I like that today we are taxing the rich. Oh, you're starting now?
Yeah. They weren't taxed before in New York.
No,
right?
I'm doing it now.
Well, yeah, this is just depressing me. Okay, we don't have to keep scrolling this, Andy. We can go to the full group view, but I don't know if you guys have anything else to add to that. I guess we'll see what happens. I think that we are going to see some very interesting, massive changes to many of our major cities for either better or worse, but it'll most likely have to get a lot worse before it gets better, would be my prediction.
In New York City, it will.
Absolutely. Well, that's depressing. Anyway, that's all the time we have, unfortunately, you guys. So thank you, everyone, for your attention to these matters. We are live every single week on Thursdays at noon Central on Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. Jim, what do you have for the audience today?
We have the Climate Realism Show coming this Friday, as it does every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on these very channels. It's going to be really fun. We're going to have Lois Perry from Heartland, UK, Europe with us. Always very energetic, so we hope to see you there.
Absolutely. And what has Sam got?
Thanks. Go to the heartland.org website for all kinds of good information, but especially my paper on housing affordability, which explains who is responsible for it, who caused the affordability crisis, and how we can get out of it.
Yes, please, guys, go read his Substack. And Chris?
First, I really hope that Zohran Mamdani reads Sam's paper, because New York City has a major housing problem, and he could learn a lot from that awesome paper. And I also hope that Zohran Mamdani goes to stoppingsocialism.com and reads some of my latest articles, because he might learn a thing or two there. I doubt that's going to happen, but you never know.
Hey, dream big. All right, for audio listeners, please rate us well on whatever service you're using and leave a review. Thank you so much to all of our usual panelists, and also, of course, to all of our viewers. We will see you again next week. Eventually. All right.